Hey there, it's Warren here. Welcome to the Business That Matters podcast. We're going to have a very interesting conversation today. Anna Rebro and Steve Farnham are partners of Farnham Co, an accounting firm with a difference. When you think of accountants and accounting firms, I'm guessing that the first words to leap from your lips may not be passion, values, relationship, joy, stuff like that. But from a commitment to exceptional client experiences, to a values-driven culture, and an internal transfer of ownership, this second-generation firm is gifted with lots of good stories that I'm hoping we'll hear a little bit about today. So I'm thrilled to have both Anna and Steve here. Welcome.
Thank you, Warren. Great to be here.
Now, before we dive into things, one of the things I do on this podcast is I like to give listeners value right off the top. So just in case they can't stick around for the whole thing, although they should, because usually at the end, there's some real gems that come out. But for each of you, you've seen lots of entrepreneurs over the years. So whether from your own experience as business owners or just from what you've seen from clients, if you had just one piece of advice or a plea for entrepreneurs who want to scale a business while, being true to what matters most to them, what would you say? Anna, you go first on this one.
If I had to pick one, I'd say build a support system. It's really lonely at the top, and we're all human. So it's good to have a group of people you can lean on when things get tough.
And does that mean like internal to the organization, or do you mean more like a social?
Not necessarily. I mean, I'm fortunate to have this support system inside the organization, but it doesn't have to be the case. You can have business coaches, you could have advisors at your table, you can have family members or friends that you can use as a resource. And it doesn't have to be one person, it could be a group of people helping you get a specific set of help or advice you need at a given point in time.
Nice. Steve, what about you?
It sounds biased coming from an accountant, but pay attention to your numbers. It still amazes me how often we'll have a year-end meeting with a client and they're coming in and asking us how they did for the year. They understand how to do their business, but not how it translates into numbers and how to interpret those and make decisions based on those. And I think too often that is something that is not, doesn't have enough attention paid to it.
Yeah, I think we're going to talk a little bit more of that as we go along. That's been my experience as well, as I've seen a lot of entrepreneurs who they don't have a good handle on their numbers. And that's actually one of the three foundations in the work I do, is make sure you understand your numbers. All right, now let's get into the Farnham story. Steve, I'll start with you since it's your name on the letterhead, Farnham. And although technically it's actually your dad's name.
That's correct. That's right. Yeah, my dad started the firm in 1963.
Wow.
The first public accounting firm it was Cooksville then, which was the precursor to Mississauga. I always gave him a hard time as to why we didn't have a tower or something if he was actually the first guy in Mississauga. So long history. I joined in 1985 after spending 4 or 5 years with, it was the big 7 firms back then. Now it's the big 4. And did something I said I would never do, which was join the family business. So it's been a journey, and it's been a great one.
And so what you said you didn't want to do that. So what made you decide to make the leap over?
When I was a kid growing up, Dad had a little accounting firm. It was he and a chain-smoking secretary and one clerk, and it just didn't. I had bigger ambitions, and that didn't fit with my dream. But it was a great platform for me to do the things that I've been able to do. And that's one of the things that is helpful for me in talking to clients that are second and third generations, is how to make it your own. Don't just ride on the coattails. If you want to feel like you've accomplished something, figure out a way to reflect yourself in.
So when or how did you kind of take over the helm? Like, when did it become your firm?
It was a transition. I would say fairly early on. I took on a lot of the internal management responsibilities, and then started transitioning clients, and then growing my own network and my own client base. So probably after 10 years, he was quite passive in the business, I would say.
And so when was that? Like, when did you really take control?
In what year do you mean, or
yeah.
what? Probably the early mid 90s.
And so what's changed in the firm since that time? So you took over, you had, your dad's imprinted his personality on the firm, and then you come in and take over. So what's changed in it over that time since the mid-90s?
I mean, the nature of the clients has changed to some extent, and the scale, and that's been a factor of my networking and building out the business. The things that haven't changed that I think are really responsible for our success are just the way we deal with entrepreneurs, and understand the relationship with them, that we're not just providing them with a product, we are part of their team, and that they can count on us. And so that's stayed consistent, but the firm has grown both in the number of clients and in, as I say, the scale and type of clients through a number of important relationships we've developed externally and referrals we've been getting.
So let's just dive into that a little bit. Who does the business serve? Because when people hear accounting firms, they often think of, the big firms dealing with the big companies. And you just mentioned you have an entrepreneurial focus. So who does the business serve, and what do you do for them?
The business serves entrepreneurial families that typically operate through corporations or other structures, but it is an all-encompassing sort of relationship. I mean, we might be engaged to do financial statements and tax returns, but that's really doing the client a disservice if that's all we're focused on, without really paying attention to what are you trying to achieve with this company? What's your objective? What's your family all about? What's your plan 5, 10, 15 years out? And to have those conversations. And those are conversations that these folks can't have really with anybody else. You can't go to your buddy at the bar at night and complain about your $500,000 tax bill or your employee. I mean, so it is lonely at the top to some extent. And so we work hard to be part of the team. And I think that's what's really been the secret sauce to a large extent.
And Anna, when did you jump on board? Like, what attracted you to this firm?
It's been almost 6 years. And I was at a stage in my career where I was looking at my experience to date and what I was hoping to accomplish moving forward. And I figured out at that time that I was really an entrepreneur. Sure, I was an accountant, but I think I'm an entrepreneur first. And I was looking for an opportunity to join a company, and I frankly didn't really care whether it was in public accounting or in the industry, but a place where I can partner up with their existing ownership team and help them take it forward. And I was fortunate enough to be introduced to Steve and learn about his firm and never look back.
And so you joined as an associate?
The title was called principal, so not really quite a partner, but basically someone that was tasked with leading a specific team that did specific type of work.
So you didn't start as a partner, but you moved into that role. So you worked with other accountants, Steve, who didn't get to that position. So what did you see in Anna that made you think, this is someone I want to bring in at that level or want to elevate to that position? And I'm not asking this to sort of, puff Anna up here and her ego and stuff, but lots of entrepreneurs face this kind of challenge of growing. Do I grow from inside? Do I look outside? And so hearing from someone who, carefully made that decision, and I think did it successfully, might be helpful. So you just walk us through your decision when you had this, younger accountant that comes in, obviously has some talent. What made you go, yeah, this is the person that I want to make a partner?
It only took me 30 years to find her, Warren. You're right. I've been doing this for 35 years. I've worked with dozens, 100 accountants coming through here, and seeing other professionals. And it's rare to find somebody that is really entrepreneurially oriented, that has the technical skills to do the work really well, but also has a personality and really an interest in the entrepreneurial journey that resonates with our clients. It's a relationship business. I mean, any accounting firm can put the numbers in the boxes. It's really about authentic relationships, and authenticity is really the key thing. But Anna is an outlier. There's no question. In my first interview with her, she expressed very clearly her desire to become a partner. And that was her goal. And if that wasn't in the cards, and not asking for a commitment or a promise, you have to walk your talk. But it was very clear that that was the objective. And it was very clear to me very quickly that that was going to become a possibility.
And can you just be like, what was it, particularly on this entrepreneurial side? Like, how do you look at somebody and go, oh, they've got that entrepreneurial thing?
Well, they have to demonstrate it. I mean, anybody can say, I want to be a partner or I'm an entrepreneur. And the proof is in the pudding. And it really comes down to how you deal with the clients. And so that's my most valuable asset. So I started dribbling clients to Anna to sort of see how the transition would go. And it became pretty clear that her only objective was to have the clients like her better than me. And that actually happened an alarming number of times. So, I knew we were on the right track. Anna came from a compliance world. The work she was doing was quite specialized relative to sort of the general world that we work in terms of tax. Her world was audits and reviews and compliance and disclosures, but the spectrum of advice we provide is quite a bit broader. And never have I seen anybody pick it up as quickly as Anna, especially from the tax technical standpoint. So it's been really, really impressive. And as I say, it is not common by any means.
Mm-hmm. And for you, Anna, not everyone, so you mentioned you had a bit of an entrepreneurial instinct, but once you get into it, like not everyone wants to take on the mantle of ownership and leadership while running a really busy practice. So what made you want to actually take on that challenge?
Well, here's how that goes. You're given lots of autonomy. And that was my experience from day one working with Steve. And that's why it really worked well for me and my personality. He had no reason to trust me from day one. And whether it's by virtue of being overwhelmed and just desperately needing help, or just truly having an autonomous type leadership style, I was given plenty of responsibility and plenty of autonomy to do whatever I wanted to do given a specific objective. And the objective was make the clients happy, build out our assurance practice in a way that could be scalable, train our staff, and then otherwise, whatever your brain comes up with, as long as it's a decent enough idea, you have the opportunity to do it. So I really enjoy that. I really enjoy having control over my destiny. I really enjoy having control over my job description. I enjoy deciding what my job is rather than people telling me what that is. And the only way you can get there is by owning your own company. And I couldn't fathom somehow things changing, and then coming to someone and saying, okay, what should I do now? What can I do now? It has to be decided only by me from now forward. And I knew that pretty early on.
So that's cool. I mean, so there's a good leadership lesson in there for others. Like, so it sounds like there's a trust piece that goes both ways, but Steve, sounds like you took the leadership style of giving people autonomy, giving them enough rope that they'll either, climb the mountain or fall down. So there's a certain amount of trust that comes with that both ways, which is pretty interesting.
There's a leap of faith involved for sure, but I think, and that's the philosophy of the firm throughout the organization, is to give people the opportunity to build their own career in a sense. Everybody here has their own portfolio of clients. I want them to think about it as if they're running their own little business, as opposed to a lot of firms where it's just a mill. It's worked as a pool. Everybody's handed one file after another. I want my staff to build relationships with clients because that's what's given me the satisfaction. But it doesn't work for everybody. I really sort of think you're entrepreneurial minded or you're not, and I'm not sure it can be trained after watching it for a long time.
Now I want to shift a little bit. I know from myself, I've worked with a lot of professional service providers, lawyers, accountants, architects, creative service agencies. I was a lawyer myself. It's kind of tough to articulate what makes a service organization unique. How do you say we do accounting better than somebody else, or how do we do lawyering better than someone else? But you guys have actually done a really great job with this. As I understand, you have three pillars to the business that collectively any other firm could probably say one of them. but you've kind of combined all three of them into a kind of a promise. Can you talk a little bit about that?
So the three pillars is quality, care, and candor. And we live every day with these things in mind. And when forced to make a decision, we lean with the guidance from these principles.
And what do they mean? So those are nice words, quality, care, candor.
Aren't they?
Yeah.
Sure. So quality sounds obvious, but it actually, to me, it's more than what you'd expect. So quality is, I think, implied when you work with accountants. You don't want to go to an accountant assuming they don't provide quality work. So everybody assumes that the accountant that they engage does quality work. Well, that's not always accurate, but everybody assumes that it is. To me, it's more than just compliance, though. So we're really fortunate to have the support of technology that helps us simplify, I guess, what otherwise is a really complex tax compliance exercise, right? Because there's programs and formulas that help you calculate the right tax as long as you've put the things into the right boxes. And it's really not that tough to figure out where to put the numbers in the tax return if you've done it a number of times. That in itself is not quality. Quality to me is then stepping back and saying, I'm these people's advisor. I need to say things that are valuable to them. And that to me is really what quality means, is without compromise every single time delivering value and not just compliance.
Which leads to the care side as well.
It really does, yeah. And I mean, I'm really proud from a quality standpoint, given the fact that we're a boutique, mid-sized firm, the complexity which we can handle and the excellence that we deliver. I really couldn't be more proud of our team for their dedication to excellence. The care piece is nuanced. And again, most people say they care, but you have to really walk the talk. So we only hire people that have the passion for entrepreneurs that we share as well. And it's recruiting market is tough, especially in this profession. I can talk for hours about why that is. And if you wanted to have a separate podcast that we could send to CPA Ontario, we can. But the bottom line is the market is tough. It's tough to find talent. And if you also have these filters that talk to, you need to also be an entrepreneur at heart and care about entrepreneurs and have a wonderful personality. The pickings are slim. Let's be real.
And that's tough too, because entrepreneurs are not easy to. One of the mistakes I've seen a lot of professionals make is they make assumptions about entrepreneurs based on sort of popular mythology rather than actually understanding who entrepreneurs and what they care about. So that filter is actually, I imagine, it's tougher to fill than people listening may understand.
And where you can't hire, it's like it's really hard to find that person that you see in the interview process and say, oh my goodness, you genuinely care for entrepreneurs and you understand them. That actually doesn't exist. So then we layer on top of that internal practices and training to help bridge that gap, to get everyone to the place where they are genuinely aware of what it's like to build a real human connection, what it actually means to understand and care for entrepreneurs. We spend an enormous amount of energy and brain power to try to make that come to life. Does it always work? No, but are we going to die trying? Absolutely. And the candor piece is interesting too, because again, we're in the service business and it seems to most that customer is always right is the right approach to run a business, except that it's not why people have advisors. People have advisors to hear honest, unbiased feedback. And that feedback isn't always going to make us look good in front of the client. We're not always going to be their favorite people because sometimes we disagree. But that's where value comes from. Ultimately, they pay us money to hear valuable advice. And that's not always going to be about making them feel great about themselves. Sometimes you're going to like, this is the dumbest idea I've ever heard. Can we talk about maybe some improvements to this crazy idea you have?
Right.
You need to have guts to be able to stand up and share your honest point of view.
On that, what's the reaction from clients on that? When it's easy to have candor when you're all in agreement and things are nice, but when you actually have to stop somebody and say, essentially, what you're doing is a really, really bad idea. What do they Like, do they appreciate it? Do they both? I'm asking because it's partly what I do as well, right? I give people hard information sometimes, and I always find that there's sort of oh, oh yeah, like an initial sort of I don't like this, but then damn it, you're actually the one person who's given me the truth when everybody else is kind of blowing smoke. Has that been your experience, or how do you run through that?
It's a range. It's interesting, Warren. I mean, I had a circumstance with a client a couple of years ago now. They were in financial difficulty. They were really seeing things through rose-colored glasses. I thought my role was to give them a bit of a reality check, and they got quite angry and viewed me as not being on their team. And it surprised me, actually. And it was a relationship that went back decades. So they had a lot of experience with me. And in this one instance, I said, this is really not going to end well. And you've got to stop kidding yourself that it will. And it just, we've still got the client, but it was a bumpy road for a little while. But most of the time, I think there's a respect level for it. Nobody wants to hear, most people really don't want advice. They want validation of what they already think. So when it comes back as a challenge, it's surprising to them. But I think they respect that. And that's been my experience most of the time.
And is it the case on this entrepreneurial side? Like I find entrepreneurs are a unique breed. And for the most part, they actually like having someone who's going to tell them the truth.
Most of them are really driven by improving themselves, and they're quite introspective and are hungry for feedback. They're super confident, but they also do appreciate honest feedback and want to be better. So I think it works well because you do work with people who genuinely want to optimize, improve things, to become better professionals or entrepreneurs or business owners or leaders. So most of them are willing to hear honest feedback.
And that's where the value, as you say, that's where the value lives. Now, to attract people who care about entrepreneurs and who actually have the guts to tell them that kind of truth, like imagine you get some, 30-year-old or 28-year-old associate coming in and they're dealing with some person who owns a $5 million business and they got to tell them the truth. That's not easy. So
they generally tell Ann and I the truth first, and then it's up to us to tell.
Then we go in with the bad news. That's right.
But you got to have some standards or expectations for your team and a culture that really promotes and supports that. So what have you done to encourage that? Like, I know you spent a lot of time on culture, but how have you managed that?
I spoke to our practices and training, and a lot of it, I think you're right. Somebody new in this career can't really navigate these situations, and they can be challenging. And not only that they don't have the experience to navigate it, they also don't have the confidence necessarily to navigate it because they're relatively young, relatively inexperienced, and they don't think of themselves as worthy to say these words out loud to these ultra successful entrepreneurs. And Steve spoke to my previous experience and how quickly I supposedly caught up to be able to do my job right now. And it was all by watching. It was all by sitting there in meetings with Steve, and for the first little while, just taking it in and understanding what made this place so special and why it was such a unique environment. And then being able to replicate that same approach with my client meetings. And I found that extraordinarily valuable for my development. So what we implemented this year, and to be fair, it's my favorite part of this job. I love client meetings. I love sitting there providing value that they feel is valuable to them. And I love making relationships with these fascinating humans. It is wonderful. It's a great, great gig. And I think the unfortunate part about public accounting in general and why it doesn't have the greatest reputation for people at a lower level is that glory is saved for partners. As in, all these people work their asses off, excuse my French, doing all this work behind the scenes. And then this partner strolls in their white horse with a briefcase and their fancy suit and says these smart words out loud. And the staff that did all this work don't get to see it learn from it and feel like they've added value to something that's more than just a set of working paper files. So to try to share this magic and help with their development and help with their confidence building, we now invite the team that worked on the file to the year-end meetings to then see what their work actually means in the real world, that they're not just number crunchers in a dark windowless office. They are on a team of professionals that our clients really look forward to seeing and have lots of questions to ask of us. And it's us collectively that we get to deliver this value. So it's been transformational. Our staff really enjoy sitting in meetings. And I can't count how much positive feedback I got from them from this introduction alone, from this new initiative alone.
Nice. Now, you did an investment of time and effort into creating values, and how that really informs the culture. Like, how's that played out for you?
It's tough. And I'm really struggling with this lately, because values is something that needs to be applicable to the group of people you have at any given time. So yes, we do have a set of values that we created a number of years ago. I want to say 4, maybe 5 years ago, that we came up with as a team at that time, and they all make all kinds of sense. And we had really great momentum at the time with the group of people at that time, having it be part of our existence. And we used to celebrate value stories from people that really demonstrated particular values at a certain point in time. And I've been struggling lately with the ability to sustain that same level of energy when talking about the values. I can speak to myself, and I can tell you wholeheartedly that I live by these values every day myself. And I think I speak for Steve, who probably could say the same things. But it's really, really tough for me anyway to believe that every one of our staff, every one of our 40 staff, right, that they wake up in the morning driven by these values that were created for them by someone else 4 years ago. And I'm really curious to learn about what could be done to have that live and evolve with us as the time goes on, as the teams develop, as we add more people to it. Because it is so important. It's so important to be aligned. It's so important for people to speak the same language and be driven by the same things. But the implementation of that, to me, has been difficult.
I talk about this a lot on the podcast, and a lot of people can make it sound as if it's really easy. Oh yeah, we did these values and then we just introduce it and our people live by them, and it can make it sound really simple, but it actually is super hard, because you've got human beings who come into an organization with all their own baggage and perceptions, and to try to think, even just to believe that this is an organization that is values driven is a hurdle as well. So what did you want to say about that, Steve?
No, it's difficult to see that people are using our values to inform them decisions they're making on a daily basis. And we need to do a better job with that. I mean, you get buried in the day-to-day work. We need to do a better job when we're onboarding new staff members to make that sort of a front and center piece of the recruiting process. So there's things that we need to look at as well. I mean, I'm really happy that we developed those. They still resonate. I think they just need to be re-energized regularly.
And yeah, I think that's probably wise. And there is a lot, it takes a huge amount of work. And I think what's challenging in your kind of organization, maybe you can speak to it, but like I used to be a lawyer long ago in a galaxy far, far away. And, all the firms had cultures, but I didn't know many that were as intentional about that as you've been. Like I didn't know any law firm that had values listed and that there were behaviors associated with them and that people talked about it. So I'm always curious in your kind of organization, because you not only are leaders, but you also have your own client base that you have to service. So what kind of load does that add to you as leaders to try to have an elevated culture? Like, it's one thing to just hire people, give them work, hopefully service clients well, but to say, no, we're going to raise standards and actually do something better for you and for clients than other people do. And what burden does that place on you?
Well, to some extent, it's selfish, Warren, because it makes it more fun for us. I mean, if you have a great culture and people are rowing in the same direction and having fun together, it's better for everybody. So it's not sort of gimmicky or business booky. It's really an authentic desire to get a whole group of people really buying into what we're trying to accomplish here as an organization, to celebrate that, to have fun doing it, and then everybody has more fun.
Right.
That's really, and Ann and I are super aligned on that. You spend a lot of time at work, you spend a lot of time with these people. We're doing some things that I think are really meaningful, which sounds kind of corny, but I think our clients largely view us as adding something meaningful. And so, but on top of that, we should be having some fun. And so we work really hard at that, but it's not easy in post-COVID. It's a lot harder because, we're sitting here on a Friday, we have seating for 50 people and there's 4 people in the office. It's soul destroying. So we do other things. We took the entire team last year to Mexico for a week. We're going to be redoing that this year to pull everybody together, to share stories, to get to know each other better. So it's all part of that journey.
And do you find is there any, one of the theses I have often is that people, when a person in a position of authority, when their actions or decisions can be subject to 2 different interpretations, people will choose the least positive one, right? Mm-hmm. Like if you just look at politics, if you listen to the way people talk about it, there's not a single politician in North America who does it for the right reasons. They're all selfish people trying to line the pockets and power of people they know. And when you hear that said like that, that just can't be true. Right? There are people who do things for the right reasons, but there's this perception we have. And I know from previous conversations with both of you that, like, I know you actually authentically want people to love their lives, right? And to grow to be the best versions of themselves. So I know that's authentic to you. But I also know, like, to do that, to elevate standards means to ask and encourage people to raise their games. Like, you got to do better to be better.
Right.
And when you do that, like, do people understand that you're doing it out of kind of love and wanting them to experience a lot, or do they have that kind of suspicious thing that you're just trying to extract more dollars out of me?
That is my biggest struggle. And there's a window cleaner coming up in my window behind us, so you guys can enjoy that. What I struggle most with and what gives me most anxiety is probably the right feeling, is I am so motivated to give into infinity. To, at the end, have a group of people that wake up every morning with a smile, excited for their day. And guess what? That day has 8 hours of work in it, but you're still excited because you know that what you're doing matters. You know that you work with people you love. You know you're going to reach outside your comfort zone and feel really great when you get there. So I know what's possible and I know what I'm willing to do to get them there. And I get my soul just crushed when all I get in response is either neutral or skeptical or outright negative feedback that basically says, just leave us alone. This is just a job. Could we please just put in our time here and go home to watch Netflix? And there's probably nothing in this world that like destroys my insights more than that exact dynamic. But that being said, I don't think I'm prepared to stop trying.
I want to transition again. So the other part of your story that's so great is that you've created a succession from Steve to Anna, and without giving away any confidential stuff, how did this come about? And for others interested in doing some sort of succession, how did you know the time was right, the person was right, that kind of thing?
It's not an easy thing to do. Whether internally or externally. We do a lot of work with our clients who are thinking about exiting, and it's tricky business. For ourselves, we'd had conversations internally for a couple of years about what that might look like. And like lots of organizations, and I take responsibility for this, it didn't go as quickly or as far as it might have. I'm aware of clients where they've had conversations with key employees about ownership. It didn't happen. They've actually lost people because it lost momentum. So we were on that journey when, frankly, I was approached by another firm with an offer that was attractive. And that was really the catalyst to kind of jumpstart the conversations internally. And maybe for Anna to help crystallize how committed she was to, it just made it all very real and really accelerated the process, I guess. There was no question in my mind that Anna was a person that would be capable of doing it. And I wouldn't have transitioned the business. I mean, this is my family legacy. I wouldn't have done it with somebody I didn't think could pull it off and do it really well and better than me even. And Anna was clearly that person, but there's a pretty significant financial commitment that goes along with that. So it was a real negotiation, and we'd known each other for 4 or 5 years before that started. So we had a base of trust, I guess, in terms of knowing each other professionally and a little bit personally. And so, but it was a real negotiation with real lawyers on both sides, and ended up being a very successful transaction. And I couldn't be more. We're a year and a half, a little more than a year and a half into that, and I couldn't be more pleased.
And how did you experience it, Anna? Like, was it? It's a tough thing when you're negotiating with a mentor in a way, to take over from them. Like, there's the business, the negotiations, and then there's the relational side of it, which is challenging. So how did you handle that?
I mean, I've always appreciated the opportunity of working here, and to have the opportunity to then become an owner of this fabulous place means the world. And it was extremely important to me to preserve the firm and all of its best aspects, and to make sure Steve never in his life regrets his decision to give it to me. Those were my driving motivators.
He gave it to you? Wow.
I was going to call it, so no, not give it to me. I wanted to make sure that he never once looks back at this and thinks, well, this was not a fair financial deal. I made sure to pay him market value for the firm, so that he never has to think about it as a financial favor he did to someone. I always wanted to make sure that he continues to do work that matters to him and makes him really happy, and that he has the opportunity to do with the rest of his career whatever he wishes. That was always really, really important to me. I wanted to make sure that both he and I never look back with regret on this really, really big decision. And I'm going to continue to operate that way into infinity. The negotiation there's the financial piece, which was not actually that tough. It's really easy to value accounting firms. And there's a known repeatable model of how you value accounting firms. And I was competing with an actual offer from another buyer. So Steve had no incentive to give me a discount necessarily. So the price was set. It was really about negotiating the points of how we're going to work together moving forward, and what flexibility, if any, we give each other in the future, with sort of how the ownership structure changes moving forward. And I found that to be seamless. We both wanted to do right by each other. We both wanted to exercise a fair bit of common sense and trust in each other's ability to just be normal human beings that are not just out to get each other. That piece was really, in my view, really easy to accomplish as well. We have a shareholders agreement that describes what we can and cannot do, but the points in the agreement were really not that tough to come up with, because we both know what common sense is. We both know what is the right thing to do.
There was a massive level of personal respect on both sides, which really facilitated that. That was the platform.
Amazing. Respecting people leads to good outcomes.
Surprising.
Okay. Let's switch a little bit from even what we talked about at the beginning back to entrepreneurs. Probably, you two have seen your fair share, so I'm sure people would like your insights as to what you think what they can do to improve their own outcomes. And one of the things I've observed over the years is that, most entrepreneurs, they love their product, they love their business, their service, they stress over their people, just almost like what you talked about earlier. They care to make sure their customers are happy. But the books, the numbers, they don't really give them that much attention, right? With the attention they deserve. They sort of I see this all the time. I look at my sales number, I look at my bank account, and that's been pretty much it. Now, I'm sure you could go on for hours about this. But what do you see as just a couple keys that entrepreneurs overlook? And I'm not looking for the usual, get your financial statements done once a month. But where do people leave themselves really vulnerable by not paying attention to this stuff?
Do you want to take that, Steve? Or
No, go for it.
I think they view financial reporting as an afterthought and like a necessary evil, but you can sort of leave it to happen whenever, independent of your involvement. They look at it as a chore. And openly say things like, I'm not good with numbers. I'm not a numbers guy. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm an engineer. I'm a construction guy, whatever is their area of expertise, but certainly not accounting. And it leaves them vulnerable because they do need people to do it. And they put a lot of trust into whatever is their version of their finance team. Sometimes it's a bookkeeper or a controller that's basically given free reins to do whatever it is they want. And they have the opportunity to do it. And they provide very little oversight internally over what goes on the financial reporting side and just keeping the lights on exercise internally. And I'm a big proponent of educating entrepreneurs on the basics of financial oversight. As in, it's not actually good enough just to ask for your financial statements every month. You need to know what you're looking at and what smart questions to ask to find anomalies, to uncover fraud risks, to find opportunities to fine-tune your pricing, shrink or expand your workforce. It's not just about getting statements once a month. So one of the tools we created for our clients is basically that. It's like financial reporting how-to for entrepreneurs. So this is the list you give to your controller every month to produce you. But then there's like a user's guide. What am I actually looking at when I'm looking at report X, Y, and Z? What am I hoping to ask in the process? And I think if implemented, that has the opportunity to really make them first more educated, but also appear and actually be more involved in the internal finance function, that could have significant rewards.
See?
Yeah, I agree fully. I mean, entrepreneurs don't pay enough attention to their numbers. They view it, entrepreneurs live in the future. Even today is not that relevant to them. And a lot of times they're just thinking about what the next deal is. They are future oriented. And so sitting with us 6 months or 3 months after their year end and looking at financial statements, you might as well poke the stick in their eye. And they're really just, and as I said at the outset, a lot of them really come to us to see how did I do? Which is surprising to me, but they would do better if they paid more attention. And even in a prospective way, Anna shared a meeting she had with me the other day, or just yesterday perhaps, where a client had an idea that they wanted to acquire another business. And they called Anna in, there's a lawyer there, they've got all kinds of professionals around the table. They've done no work numerically to kind of validate this idea that they had. I mean, and maybe you need help doing it, but again, there's a reluctance to really just look at numbers for whatever reason.
And it's not just for what has happened, but for what you can do.
Right. Pricing decisions, all sorts of things. The other thing I find that's common, and not universally, but short-term decisions are made at the expense of better long-term decisions. And there's too much focus on income taxes. One, people think they're going to get wealthy by saving taxes, and they make poor decisions just based on the tax results. Or just profitability is a byproduct of just doing things really, really well. Mm-hmm. And if you just focus on making your machine better, faster, smarter, you're going to make more money. But make decisions based on not the bottom line, but just our decision to take people to Mexico at one level, that's an expense that we can't quantify the benefit from, but we have a confidence that this is a good thing for the organization, and it will pay off. And a lot of people are too focused on short-term costs that really, is hindering their opportunities going forward, in my view.
I had a client once who, it was sort of a head shaker where he was actually resisting some initiatives that would facilitate quite significant revenue growth because he didn't want to pay more in taxes.
Right.
Mm-hmm. I was like, but you're going to wind up with a whole lot more. Yes, the government will have more, but so will you. And it was like his whole social network was built on this idea that we don't want to pay more taxes. And he was shooting himself in the foot.
Yeah. And that's not that uncommon, Warren. It's amazing how many people are just laser focused on taxes, and it's absolutely a mistake. I mean, we'll make sure you pay the least amount of tax. You run your business, make good business decisions, and then we will help you with the tax piece. I mean, that's
Now, what would you say then what advice would you give somebody for how to work with accountants? Like I say to my clients all the time, like, you've got to make sure, don't get your books just set up for tax purposes, like to put things in little holding accounts and it gets reconciled 11 months later. Like, you need information now to help you make decisions now. Like, one of the things I always say is they're called the books because they tell a story.
I like that.
And so you got to learn how to read the story so that you can learn how to make the right decisions. But that means having a relationship with the accountants where you're getting the kind of information you need. Like, if you suck at numbers, fine, you suck at numbers. Accountants don't. So how do you partner with someone like you to make sure you're getting the right information in real time so that you can make decisions rather than just reflect on past decisions?
We do a lot of business development. Or I should say, we are introduced to many prospective clients, and we go on a lot of introductory meetings where we get to learn about their needs and their experiences from their previous accounting relationships. And it is astounding how little people ask of their accounting advisors. I think it needs to be an expectation that an accountant is an advisor. They're not just an accountant, right? The term accountant should no longer be used. We are their financial advisors, and you should treat us as such. We should help you with your business strategy, with your organizational structure to accomplish a certain end result. Meetings with us shouldn't be about, oh, I gave you a box of receipts. Did you plug the numbers into the tax return? What taxes do I pay? That is a ridiculous waste of money. It should be about how can you use the time with this advisor to help your business be better, to help your structure be optimized. We went to school not to just study tax and accounting, right? Like, we are CPAs that were taught to look at business problems and help people problem solve real business issues. And that should be required from your accounting relationship. And it is astounding to me how people stick with an accountant for decades who they acknowledge is barely doing their job. We just met somebody last week who shared with us that their accountant of 20, 30 years last year just forgot to file their tax return. And they still stuck with them for another year, which is astounding. So clients need to ask more of us. And when you interview new firms, you need to be able to dig into that and say, what kind of strategic advice can you offer? Can we be partners in this business together? Because like I said, with software available these days, most people can pretend to be an accountant, but very few people can actually be an advisor.
And a lot of clients, a lot of entrepreneurs don't know what to ask and don't really fully understand what we can do for them. They think about it as a compliance exercise. I have to file a tax return. The bank requires an audit. Let's get that for the least amount of money possible. But in addition to just the business advice, it goes beyond that. I mean, we talk to people regularly, even in the pitch meeting that we had last week that Anna referred to. Are your wills done? What's your succession plan? Your son's been working in the company for 20 years. You're in your 70s. If you thought about what the game plan is. They don't know what questions to ask sometimes, and we can facilitate that discussion. But it's amazing how many pretty substantive clients, new clients we onboard, where really a lot of this hasn't been thought of. Their structure makes no sense in terms of what their objectives are. It's amazing to me.
All right, so we've been really generous with your time. So I always end these things with a rapid fire, but I'm going to just alternate between you on each of the. So I'll ask one more person one question, on the other. So I'll start with you, Steve. One decision or action that most helps you get where you are.
It's supposed to be rapid.
Yes. Thank you.
TikTok.
Not one action. I guess joining my dad's firm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could have stayed in the big public accounting firms. My career would have taken a very different trajectory, but that was the one turning point that was meaningful.
Anna, if I had to do it over again, I would.
Change nothing.
Nice.
Wow.
It's the one aspect of running a business I have yet to master.
Being as tough as I need to be sometimes.
You big softy. Anna, the problem I would most like to solve in my business.
The culture piece, consistent, replicable. We used to joke about it. Like, I want people to walk into the office and put on their cult robes and really feel it and live it. If I could make that a reality, I think that'll pay off in ways that are really tough to explain.
Now, the last two, I'd like each of you to answer. So the first one is one personal quality that I most had to improve or overcome.
The difficulty in delivery. I don't like to disappoint people. I have confrontational issues. So the candor part, I guess, when it comes to both staff and clients, is something that I continue to work at.
Anna?
Vulnerability. I am working on being more vulnerable and opening up more in all aspects of my life and business relationships with my staff, with my family. I, for some reason, lived in this world where it's all going to happen in my head. I'll figure out the answer and nobody needs to know that the journey that it took from A to B. And I'm finding that it's actually fascinating to share. I'm finding that people actually care. And it's something that's relatively new to my existence, but I'm going to continue down this path. It's been fascinating.
And one personal quality, no false humility here. What's the one personal quality that most contributed to your success?
I would say curiosity. I am endlessly fascinated by entrepreneurs and the business journey and people's personalities and staff. And there's never a day that goes by where something new hasn't happened or I've learned something new. And I think curiosity is a big piece of that.
Anna?
I think, and Steve can confirm I'm on the right track here, but the idea that you need to be always living outside the box. And you don't have to be far outside the box, but just peek right over that edge. So no, it's not good enough to just throw a dinner party. It has to have some magic. No, it's not good enough to just have a financial statement finished. There has to be some magic. Everything has to have some magic. And you can't allow yourself to just, do things asleep. You have to be awake, conscious, driven to do it a way that nobody else can do. And I live by that every day.
That's awesome. What a great place to end. How can people get a hold of you?
Call Steve's cell phone. I'll leave it in your notes.
Yeah, when he's out on the sailboat, he'll start getting calls. What's the website where people can reach you?
You can Google Farnham and Company.
All righty. Any last thoughts before we go?
No, this was delightful. Thank you so much for your time.
It was a lot of fun, Warren, and thank you for the contribution you've made to our success. It's been meaningful. We appreciate it.
Well, thank you. That's it for another episode of the Business That Matters Spotlight. See you next time.